it starts with transparency from your government to your community. So what AY has been doing is trying to influence transparency, right? So we can at least be an example to other black cities or to other governments or to other, local law enforcement, to their people, right? So when we do a proper policing town hall, that's to show the people, these are your public officials. These are your police officers that are making the policy for the police that you see that are pulling you over, that are in your neighborhood, that are arresting you when you do something wrong, right? That's transparency.
With everything going on with police brutality and the Black Lives Matter movement, what is your goal moving forward to help enforce change for African Americans in today's society?
The position I'm in, the first thing that I have to make sure of is that we have a relationship with the community. That's the first thing, that we have to be open, we have to be transparent, we have to have conversations like this. The next big thing for me is that I have to make sure that I'm hiring the right people. So when you talk about standards and how you do backgrounds, how you do psychological testing, you have to make sure that you're hiring the right people. And then also you have to look at what the demographics of your community are. And Greensboro, we're a very diverse community. So a lot of our efforts are geared towards trying to recruit minorities and women to try to reflect the community that we serve. And we still need help with that, quite honestly. And I know a lot of departments do. The other part is making sure that you've got proper training in place for your officers so that they know what's expected of them and how they are to treat the citizens that we serve when they go out. So you can avoid the incidents of police brutality. If they're properly trained, those incidents of excessive force is typically how we classify it. If they're properly trained, you're not going to see those incidents of excessive force. So you have to make sure you have a very strict training regimen in place to make sure that they know what they're supposed to be doing. And the other part is policies. Is you have to make sure you've got policies in place that are clear about what is expected of those officers when they go out, essentially what the rules are, not necessarily always what the law says, but also what your individual policies say, and making sure that they understand that before they go out. The other part too is to make sure that you got a process in place that if a citizen has an issue with a police officer, that you've got a process in place through, we call it professional standards. A lot of people refer to it as internal affairs, and make sure that people understand how to actually get in touch with your department or your city officials if they have a issue with a police officer, so that we can follow up on that and determine whether or not that officer violated one of our policies. So that's really quick and in a nutshell. I'm sure Travis has some stuff that he can add to it, but those are kind of the main things that we hit upon to make sure that we avoid incidents of excessive force or police brutality.
Thank you, Chief James. Chief Stroud, your go.
Chief James is exactly right. I mean, a lot of the points he hit are exactly what we're going to fall in line with as the High Point Police Department. But I agree. And as far as the question goes, I don't think it comes down to enforcing change in society. We want to facilitate or promote that. We're not looking to enforce anything but the law. You got to want to change. And I think you have to recognize that maybe things aren't so good to start moving along that direction. That comes from the community and the police department. But for us, Brian said it best. We have to have open lines of communication with each other, and it has to be a conversation. From our end, one of our operating philosophies here is only worry about what you can control. We control our police department. And I think our officers, we get so locked into enforcement mode sometimes that we fail to see the other part of that equation, which is the citizen on the other end of that interaction that we're dealing with. And we fail to have probably the level of empathy that we need. We don't see past the enforcement part of it. And I think it's going to be a learning curve for our folks to really get in line with that, to see both sides, the police side and the community. I know we're the police, but we need to see the other side as well. We want the public to have a better understanding of what we do, but more importantly, why are we doing what we're doing? I think once you take the time to explain the why to people, there probably is a better understanding in there. But that comes with open lines of communication and being transparent on our end. Sometimes I think through the years of law enforcement, we've not been the greatest at doing that, but I think we're all sort of coming around now and saying this is the way you have to be. You got to establish that trust with your community. We do need some of our community partners to get involved. Law enforcement cannot solve every problem, period.
So Chief Stroud, with
Yes, sir.
with 15 seconds left on your question, are you putting anything in place as far as sensitivity training for the officers out there?
Yeah, well, we a lot of that's already been in place.
Okay,
For
okay,
years.
great.
For years we've been doing that, but yes, we're exploring all kinds of options now that we haven't touched before because we need to make a shift.
Thank you.
And can I just say one thing? I'm sorry.
Go for it.
A couple extra seconds. One thing Travis kind of hit upon about explaining things to people. It's something we've been doing for several years. It's called procedural justice. And if you Google it, all kinds of articles and scholarly articles will come up. But procedural justice really is explaining to people what you're doing. So, even if you're on a traffic, making sure you explain it to the person, I'm Officer James. The reason why I stopped you is because you were doing 51 and a 35. Could I see your license registration?